It starts with a dinner. You're a special agent, 3 years into your posting at the DEA's Bogota office, and a local police colonel invites you to a restaurant in the Zona Rosa district. Nice place. White tablecloths. The kind of restaurant your government per diem doesn't cover. The colonel is your liaison. He runs a vetted unit, hand-picked cops trained by the DEA to be trustworthy in a country where trust is a commodity nobody can afford. He orders a $200 bottle of wine. He orders for the table. The bill comes to $600 and he waves your hand away when you reach for your wallet. It's nothing, he says. Hospitality. You let him pay because the alternative is insulting the man you need operational cooperation from every single day. You tell yourself it's cultural. You tell yourself this is how things work in Latin America. The next week he does it again. The week after that, it's a weekend at his ranch outside the city. Horses, asado, his family. His wife cooks. His kids call you Tio. You're being handled and you don't know it yet. Or maybe you do, and you choose not to see it because the food is good and the whiskey is expensive and your actual life involves a government apartment with a broken air conditioner and $95,000 a year that barely covers child support to your ex-wife in Virginia. The first real money comes 6 months later. The colonel tells you about a seizure his unit made. 400 kilos of cocaine intercepted at a checkpoint outside Medellin. Standard operation. Your name goes on the report as the supervising DEA agent. Good for your stats. Good for your career. What the colonel doesn't put in the report is that there were 600 kilos on the truck. The missing 200 went into the back of a police SUV and disappeared into the distribution chain of the very cartel you're supposed to be dismantling. A week later, there's an envelope in the glove compartment of your embassy car. $20,000. No note, no fingerprints. You sit in the parking garage of the embassy for 45 minutes holding the envelope. You think about Kiki Camarena, the DEA agent, who was kidnapped and tortured and killed by a cartel in Mexico in 1985. They drilled a hole in his skull and injected him with adrenaline so he'd stay conscious during the interrogation. Every DEA agent knows that story. It's the agency's founding trauma. You think about that story, and then you put the envelope in your jacket and walk into the office and file the seizure report exactly the way the colonel wrote it. 400 kilos seized, case closed, stats up, career advancing, $20,000 richer. You tell yourself this is the cost of doing business in a war that can't be won. And you're not wrong about the war. The DEA has an annual budget of $3.2 billion. It employs over 4,000 special agents across 239 offices worldwide. And every year, more cocaine leaves Colombia than the year before. More fentanyl crosses the border than the year before. More Americans die from overdoses than the year before. Over 100,000 a year now. The drug war isn't a war. It's a jobs program. Everyone on both sides knows this. The agents know it. The prosecutors know it. The cartels definitely know it. An agent in your office said it best after 3 beers at the embassy bar. You can't win an unwinnable war. There's so much dope and there's so much money. We know we're not making a difference. He wasn't wrong. He was just honest enough to say it out loud. That honesty is the first crack in the foundation. Once you accept you can't win, the question shifts from how do we stop the drugs to how do we benefit from the drugs. That's where the money lives, in the gap between the mission statement and the reality. The amounts increase. $20,000 becomes $50,000. The colonel introduces you to a man he calls a businessman. The businessman's real name is on a sealed indictment in the Southern District of Florida, but nobody has executed the warrant because the businessman has friends in the Colombian Attorney General's office and friends at the DEA. Friends like you. The businessman needs specific things. He needs to know which shipping containers are flagged for inspection at the port of Cartagena. He needs to know which informants are feeding information to the Bogota office. He needs to know the operational schedules of DEA surveillance aircraft. You provide this information because by now the envelope has become a wire transfer to an account in Panama. that your wife doesn't know about and your agency doesn't audit. You're not stealing drugs. You're not pulling the trigger on anyone. You're sharing information, data points, numbers on a spreadsheet. The fact that those numbers translate to tons of cocaine reaching American streets and people dying in apartment buildings in Baltimore and Philadelphia and the Bronx is an abstraction you've learned to live with. Everyone in this business learns to live with abstractions. The prosecutors call dead people overdose statistics. The generals call dead civilians collateral damage. The economists call human suffering externalities. You call it the cost of doing business in a system that was broken before you got here. The lifestyle changes. You start traveling for operational purposes that are really excuses to spend money. Madrid for a soccer match. Amsterdam for a weekend. The Dominican Republic for a party that involves a yacht, a dozen bottles of Moet, and women whose company someone else is paying for. You and a group of agents and prosecutors call yourselves a nickname. Something American and ironic. You laugh about it over drinks. You pick cities for money laundering pickups based on which ones have the best nightlife or which coincide with tennis tournaments. You're spending cartel money in VIP rooms and expensing it to the government as operational costs. Nobody in Washington questions it because the money seizure numbers keep going up. That's the metric. That's all anyone measures. How much money did you seize? How many kilos did you interdict? The numbers look great on paper. The fact that every seizure is carefully negotiated with the cartel to sacrifice 30% of a shipment so the other 70% arrives safely is a detail that doesn't appear in any report. 2 years in, you get a phone call that changes everything. One of the informants you manage, a mid-level trafficker who's been feeding you intelligence in exchange for immunity, has been kidnapped. The cartel found out he was talking. They found out because the information you sold to the businessman included the informant's identity. His name was Miguel. He had a wife and 3 children in a suburb outside Cali. You recruited him personally. You promised him protection. You promised his family would be safe. You shook his hand and looked him in the eyes and told him the United States government would stand behind him. 3 days after the phone call, they find Miguel's body in a ditch outside Buenaventura. His fingers were removed. His tongue was cut out. The message was literal. This is what happens to people who talk. You attend a briefing about Miguel's death. You sit in a room with other agents and analysts while someone presents the facts and expresses concern about the compromise of the informant network. You nod along. You ask appropriate questions. You suggest increasing security protocols for other informants. Nobody suspects you because you are the deputy chief of the office that manages informant security, the fox guarding the henhouse. You go home that night and drink half a bottle of scotch and stare at the wall and think about Miguel's children who will grow up without a father because you sold his name for money. You expected to feel something devastating. You feel something, but it passes faster than you thought it would. That's the part they don't tell you about corruption. It doesn't get harder. It gets easier. Every line you cross makes the next one shorter. The money is real now. $2.7 million in offshore accounts across 3 countries. Shell companies in Panama, the British Virgin Islands, and a front corporation in Miami that pretends to be a consulting firm. You've bought property, a condo in Boca Raton under a trust, an investment in a restaurant that launders money the old-fashioned way, through inflated receipts and phantom customers. You wear better suits. You drive a better car. Your second wife, the one you met at the embassy in Bogota, shops at stores your salary can't justify. You tell people she has family money, an inheritance from a grandmother in Barranquilla. Nobody checks because nobody in the DEA audits the lifestyle of an agent whose seizure statistics are among the best in the hemisphere. The agency doesn't want to find corruption. Corruption means headlines. Headlines mean congressional hearings. Congressional hearings mean budget cuts. So the agency looks the other way as long as the numbers look good and your numbers look spectacular. You get promoted. Back to the States. A senior position at headquarters in Arlington. You're now involved in policy decisions that affect operations across Latin America. You sit in meetings with the administrator. You brief senators on closed-door intelligence committees. You shape which cartels get targeted and which get left alone. And the cartel you've been protecting for the past 5 years is the one that gets left alone. Not obviously. Not in any way that would trigger an investigation. Just a gentle steering of resources toward competitors. A recommendation that the Sinaloa corridor is better resourced for interdiction than the Pacific route. An assessment that the CJNG poses a greater threat than the organization writing your checks. Nobody questions it because you frame it in the language of strategic prioritization and limited resources. Because that's what policy is. Deciding what to ignore. The investigation starts the way they always do. Quietly. An analyst in the Inspector General's office notices a pattern. Informants connected to your office have a higher mortality rate than the national average. Financial forensics flags a series of wire transfers between a Panamanian shell company and an account linked to a restaurant in Miami. A whistleblower, some agent you barely remember from the Jamaica office, files a complaint about irregularities in evidence handling. The pieces start connecting. You can feel it. Not because anyone tells you, but because people stop making eye contact in the hallway. Because your access to certain classified systems gets delayed by an extra second. Because a colleague you've known for 15 years suddenly stops inviting you to lunch. You've been on the other side of this equation enough times to recognize the signs. The machine is turning, and it's turning toward you. You have options. You can run. You know people in countries without extradition treaties. You have enough money to disappear, to become someone else in a place where nobody asks questions. But running means confirming everything. Running means your children grow up knowing their father was a traitor. You can cooperate. Walk into the U.S. Attorney's office and trade everything you know for a reduced sentence and witness protection. But you know what happens to agents who cooperate. The cartel has a long memory and a longer reach. 2 informants and witness protection were found in the last decade, one in Arizona, one in Florida, both dead, both supposedly protected by federal marshals who couldn't protect them from a network that spends $500 million a year on corrupting law enforcement. Or you can stay. Brazen it out. Trust that the evidence is circumstantial. Trust that the lawyers can find technicalities. Trust that the same system you've been exploiting for a decade will fail to convict you because it fails to convict almost everyone. The conviction rate for federal agents charged with corruption is lower than you'd think. Juries don't want to believe that the people who protect them are the same people destroying them. You stay. You go to work every day. You sit in meetings about drug interdiction strategy, knowing that you are the reason the strategy fails. You shake hands with senators who trust your briefings. You mentor young agents who look at you with respect because you have 20 years of service and a wall full of commendations, and they have no idea that the man teaching them how to fight the cartels is the cartel's most valuable employee. You're 54 years old. You have 6 years until retirement, 6 years until a federal pension and a consulting job with a defense contractor who will pay you $300,000 a year to advise on narcotics interdiction using expertise you gained from both sides of the war. 6 years of keeping the mask in place. You've been wearing it so long, you've forgotten what your real face looks like. Sometimes at night you think about the oath you took at Quantico, the day they gave you your badge and your credentials, the way your mother cried, the handshake from the administrator who said you were joining the most important fight in law enforcement. You think about Miguel's children. You think about the tons of cocaine that reached American streets because of coordinates you provided and schedules you leaked and informants you burned. You think about the 100,000 people who die every year from overdoses, and you wonder how many of those deaths trace back to a decision you made in a parking garage in Bogota holding an envelope full of cash. Then you check the balance of the account in Panama, and the thoughts go quiet. Not away. Never away. Just quiet enough to sleep. You're not a good person. You probably never were. But you're alive, and you're free, and you're going to retire with full benefits, and nobody will ever know what you did. In the drug war, that's the only victory available. The money keeps moving, the drugs keep flowing, the bodies keep stacking. And somewhere in Bogota right now, a colonel is taking a new DEA agent to dinner at a nice restaurant in the Zona Rosa. White tablecloths, a $200 bottle of wine. It's nothing, he says, just hospitality.